We start with the comments that we saw, what we heard earlier on from the president, saying this is a momentous occasion in the fight against corruption. Your thoughts?
Well, it will be if there are consequences, and I think that's the important distinguisher between this report and others, and will be the litmus test of whether this government is serious about accountability or not. This is not the first commission of inquiry we've had. We've had the Sariti Commission, we've had the Farlam Commission. All of these are characterized by the fact that very few people are held accountable at the end of them. And I think what we're looking to do is to ensure that those responsible and those who are identified as the chief protagonists in these reports are brought to justice and dealt with. And that also that the environments that created the opportunities for state capture to flourish are shut off, so that it doesn't matter what faction or what party is in power again, that never again would our state be subject to the type of state capture that we saw. And so I think that the president can call it momentous. I think the momentous moment will come when we start to see the first convictions, the first imprisonments, the first civil recoveries, and the first sackings of ministers and other high-placed ANC people who have, in commissions past, always managed to escape the net.
So the president also said that, agencies such as the Hawks, can go ahead and actually start taking action immediately after having a look at, the first truncheon in the state capture report, or volume 1, shall we call it. Do you think they will? Do you have faith in these institutions?
Well, there's nothing precluding them from having taken action already. And frankly, if I was the Hawks, I would have been sitting at the Zondo Commission and writing out the dockets as the testimonies were given and commencing those investigations. If they're only going to be commencing those investigations now, I think they're going to find that some of the protagonists, as we saw in the arms deal, have moved overseas, have left their positions, or who have passed on. And I think it's going to be very, very difficult then to bring everyone to justice. So they're going to have to move very, very quickly if that is the case. I would sincerely hope that any investigating authority worth its salt would, like you and I and many of the citizens around the country, been watching the proceedings of the Zondo Commission with much interest, making notes and determining how we would proceed. And so I sincerely hope that they do that. Unfortunately, their track record since the disbandment of the Scorpions, with their 98% plus conviction rate, has not been as stellar as that particular crime-fighting organization. And let's hope the Hawks can finally find their wings and start bringing some of these people to justice.
So almost 1 billion rand later, what's your key takeaway from all of this?
Well, the big thing that came out for me from the commissioner, I was fortunate enough to attend a few days of the testimony, particularly when the president was testifying. And a hobby horse of ours has been this whole issue of cadre deployment, which we believe was one of the key catalysts that created the environment for state capture to take place. And one of the findings we'll be watching very, very keenly is what Judge Zondo's findings are around cadre deployment and the cancerous effect that it's had on state-owned entities and on the effect of this cadre deployment on the efficiency and effectiveness of the state, and how it has essentially hollowed out the state and then created the fertile ground for the capture that we have seen and heard a lot about. So that is one of the things that I certainly would hope. If one thing comes out of the Zondo Commission that will help South Africa going forward, I believe it would be an outlawing of cadre deployment and a move away from this terrible policy which has caused so much havoc and travesty across our government and across our public enterprise.
Earlier on, I spoke with Bantu Olumisa, the leader of the UDM, and he was calling on all opposition parties to work together somehow to push for those prosecutions that you're speaking about. I mean, it wasn't 100% clear, but his main call was just to say, can opposition parties work together? What's your take on that clarion call?
Well, opposition parties have never been the problem. And as you would know from many efforts of my own party, the Democratic Alliance, against people like Menzi Simelane, Hlaudi Motsoeneng, Sean Abrahams, and others who were all agents of the capture process, as well as the work we've done in Parliament. It's never been opposition parties that have been the problem. The problem has been the governing party, and some of the chief acts of omission and commission have come from on the government's own benches, and some of those architects of state capture still sit in the parliamentary benches and chairpersonship positions and in the cabinet. And so that's where the real challenge is going to lie. I don't think you're going to have any problem with the opposition parties coming together to ensure that those who are responsible for state capture are held accountable. It's going to be whether the president can finally put South Africa before his own party, because no doubt there will be some senior ANC individuals who are implicated in the Zondo Commission report, and whether he's going to have the mettle to act against them, to take on his own associates in a year in which he faces an NGC and potential elective conference, and whether he's going to have the mettle to be able to stand and stare down those forces within his own party who are involved in state capture, or whether he's going to put the organization and its unity ahead of South Africa yet again. And I think that's going to be the big litmus test for us to be watching this particular few months as they unfold.
You mentioned Parliament. Does Parliament, yourselves as well, of course, involved in Parliament, a part of Parliament, do you wait 4 months on for the President's response? He says he's going to come to Parliament with a plan of action after going through all 3 volumes, looking at the full report. Or is there any other course of action that Parliament can proceed with before that?
Well, if we take the President's reading speed, it took him a couple of months to get through what it was, I think, a 25-page finding report into Zweli Mkhize. I think that this volume may take a lot longer than 4 months at that particular pace. But here's the thing. I don't think that we need to delay the parliamentary processes. I think that report should be tabled in Parliament as soon as possible, particularly given the fact, and there's been some litigation and some concern in circles around whether the President himself should be receiving the report, given the fact that it is his organization and his government and his own role as the former leader of government business and the former deputy president of the Republic of South Africa under President J.G. Zuma, whether he is the right person to be receiving it. The best antidote to that is tabling it as soon as possible in Parliament, so that we can start to firewall the institutions against any potential further state capture, and the Parliament could get to work. Parliament itself is also in the dock, I believe, in a number of aspects. And I think that allowing state capture to happen, whether parliamentary committees were robust and working enough, whether the presiding officers in Parliament were allowing MPs, particularly opposition MPs, to be able to do that robust engagement and ask the tough questions, or whether that by defanging Parliament, they actually aided and abetted the state capture project. And so there's going to have to be some introspection on Parliament's side as well. But I really do believe the sooner we get those reports into Parliament in a multi-party environment, the sooner we can start to sanitize the country against any further aspects of state capture and prevent it ever from happening again.
I can't let you go without, of course, we were talking about Parliament and, this awful, terrible fire at the National Assembly earlier on. Now, your party has come out and said there were warning signs in terms of the security of Parliament, the systems that were in place. What sort of warning signs were there before that you highlighted?
Well, I mean, there was a fire in March last year, but I mean, I was a chief whip before I became the leader of my party and the leader of the opposition in the House. And in many of the parliamentary meetings with the executive authority in Parliament, issues around security were highlighted, and very little of those were actioned. We also know there was a BDO report that was tabled in 2021. It took months to get to the minister and then a further few months to get to Parliament. And I think if that had been actioned, we could maybe have avoided a lot of what has happened. There were warnings as well that were given. Minister de Lille, in a press statement last year, issued a statement in which he highlighted 2 dangerous areas and 1 critical area, particularly around the heritage threat to that fire and proposed to Parliament and posed to Parliament. Those were not acted on. And I think that there are going to have to be some questions answered. And I think what we don't need now is to have a passing of the buck. I think every department that's complicit or has been responsible, whether it's the SAPS, whether it's Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, whether it's the Parliament's presiding authority and executive authority, are going to have to step up and take responsibility. This is a huge, huge loss for South Africa. Priceless treasures, priceless artworks, and the crucible of our democratic debate and the home of our democracy has been razed to the ground. Now, obviously, Parliament is more than just the bricks and mortar. It's embodied by the work the Constitution and treaties us to do as public representatives. And I think the best antidote to what has happened is to get up and running as quickly as possible. And I've just come off a meeting with the Speaker and several of the other presiding officers where we emphasised those points, that it's important that the public see that their Parliament has not skipped a beat and that the people's business carries on, and that the roles entrusted to Parliament by the Constitution are fulfilled to the best of Parliament and best of members of Parliament's ability in the coming weeks and months. The plans are already afoot to get SONA back on track on the date in which it was originally announced. Alternative venues are already being sought. And so I think it's very, very important that people see that their Parliament continues to work for them.
All right, John, lastly and quickly, I suppose, rebuild or move?
Rebuild, without a doubt. I think that it's going to be far cheaper to reconstruct on the site. Bear in mind, there are large parts of the building, as well as the Steenhuisen complex, the Marx building, 90 Plain Street. There are significant parts of that building that have not been damaged or developed or destroyed. And replicating that vis-a-vis a rebuild where Parliament is going to be far cheaper, I believe, in the long run. Parliament is also the seat of Parliament, and unless an act of Parliament is passed that changes that, that is how it's going to be. But I certainly think that Parliament should remain in Cape Town, and I think that the rebuild will send a very strong message out to the public and to the people that you can try what you like, whatever obstacles stand in our way, our democracy will prevail, and it will continue.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us this evening on SA Tonight. That's DA leader John Steenhuisen.